Thank you for listening to our Sunday Plus podcast. For more great content, please use the LifePoint app, which you can download today at lifepointaz.com.
Well, hello and welcome again to Sunday Plus. My name is Josh.
I am Jeremio, or Jeremy.
Is it really?
I have no idea.
Okay. But we're here with another edition of Sunday Plus. If you were wondering where we were last week, we were taking a look, and we're going back to the old model of being able to talk about two messages in the same episode.
Oh, that's exciting.
Just gives us more to talk about, and it makes it more impactful for you, and then it also gives us a little bit of a break. So
yeah, there you go.
It's great. And so we have been just in the middle. We're actually right at the halfway marker a little bit
this
of this new series, really looking at the blessed life. And we actually have a guest speaker.
We do.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's been
all the way from
interesting.
Texas.
Yes. And it's not a traditional guest speaker in the way that you would fly somebody over.
No.
And so how have you been experiencing this video series? Because I think it's new for a lot of people to be experiencing a Sunday morning, like, in-person thing. But then to be able to have a speaker on a screen,
yes.
You know, what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, I honestly was not entirely sure how it would play out on a Sunday morning. With we don't. This is Prescott Valley.
Yes.
You know, we're not exactly like in the middle of Silicon Valley tech hub.
Yes.
Anything where this would be something that people are sort of used to or seeing in other things.
Yep.
So I wasn't sure how our congregation would receive it, how it would play out, but I think it's actually been really, really effective.
It has been.
And from sort of that response and just with that mindset, I'm kind of looking around and not really just engaging in the sermon,
Yes.
trying to think, okay, how's this being received? Because not only are we doing it 1 week, like we're looking at 5 weeks,
Yes.
where this is happening. And so I was really impressed. People are laughing at the jokes. They're responding with like he says, okay, everyone repeat after me. And I'm thinking, I hope they do it. And they did, you know?
Yeah.
And so with the depth of the teaching, what he's got, you really become just immersed in the message. And Pastor Mike has done a really good job of inviting people and saying, hey, look, This is a response kind of thing. So that's been helpful. And the original broadcast was done as a simulcast.
Yes.
So he does, the speaker addresses, okay, so all of those of you watching out there.
Yes.
Which helps kind of take down some of that, what might otherwise just be a viewing experience.
Yeah, even though it's a rebroadcast, we weren't obviously a part of the original.
Right.
But it is just an interesting dynamic. And it's something, again, to do it once a week or to do it one time, I should say.
Right.
Or to do it on a special presentation. We've done movie screenings and different things here at the church. But to do that series for a length of time, it is an adjustment. And so let us know, how are you guys seeing this? How are you experiencing it? Online, I don't anticipate that there's a ton of difference because you're already watching the screen,
something.
And so
it's actually really seamless.
It has been. It's been really, really cool to see the way that it works out. And the content, man, is amazing. Let's get into these first couple of messages where Pastor Robert Morris is just really breaking down the basics and then coming into this past message of what tests and the faith that it sometimes takes to be able to be generous. What really stood out to you in either one of those messages that you think people could glean from, if they haven't already?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two biggest things for me, the first message was it's all about the heart. Mm-hmm. And so going back to that thing of really this thing of giving, of money, of where God is and what he's requiring and requesting, and that this is a principle.
Yep.
It's really it exposes our heart. Where's our heart really at?
Yeah.
And then this thing of thanksgiving, of how how are we saying thank you
Yes.
to the one who gives us the talents, who gives us the abilities, who blesses us? Are we saying thank you with our resources?
Yep.
And so last week was about the tithe, and I think of the two messages, it was very direct. He did not pull any punches, but at the same time, it was really good toward the end. He just really drives home the point that, look, this isn't about church finances. This isn't about our bottom line, as we see multiple times through Scripture, and that's why it was called the test. Like, this is something that God actually says, hey, test me in this and see if I won't just like pour out like this. When I can trust you with the things that I've given, man, I will entrust more to you. And we see it through parables. We see it all kinds of places. So really tying that back into our personal spiritual health and the health of our heart, and how those things are tied to our pocketbook has been really good.
You know, I really, through this series, through watching it, we previewed it as a pastoral staff, as a teaching team, just to make sure that it was going to be able to translate, and we all felt really good about it. And I remember watching through those messages, and then watching back, our live streams and the way that our church has been interacting with it. And it is a very interesting thing, because especially in our day and age where people are either deconstructing all over the place or just overtly critical of the church itself, money and finances is always something that ties that disdain for the church as a body, as a church, as a 501c3 here in America. Like, there are so many different things that finances tie into that can have people point a finger.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see. I remember it being in youth ministry, as a student, and we had a youth leader.
It's like, I hope you still are in youth ministry. What are you saying?
Yes, I know. Here's I'm joking.
The big reveal.
Yes, I know. But so I remember being a student in my youth ministry, and we had a youth leader who is just very passionate about giving. And he was tried and true. Like, he only knew a few scriptures, but man, he was going to let you know what he knew. And this youth leader was always doing our Speed the Light offering. And he always did the same thing over and over, which was Malachi chapter 3. And in talking about bringing everything to the storehouse, and it really is that invitation of God testing. He says, hey, test me in this. When you compare that challenge to test him in finances and in giving and in resources and in generosity, you don't see him openly invite people to test him. As a matter of fact, he warns against that in so many other areas of Scripture. Yet here in finances and generosity and giving, he's saying, hey, no, please test me in this and watch what happens with it. I look at a story like Job, where Job is being critical of the way God is treating him and the way that things are happening. And I might be going off on a tangent here, but I do think it connects, because God kind of puts him in his place and says, hey, man, where were you when I fashioned everything? Where were you when I spoke the earth into existence? Where were you when I hung the stars up? And it really sets him straight. Yet you have that with something like creation or God's sovereignty, yet you have an open test of saying, hey, no, please do this and watch what I do in return. It's a very interesting dynamic when you look at the overall expanse of who God is, that he would openly invite a test like that. And I think it does speak to the importance. You have a lot of new believers and a lot of young believers, baby Christians, if you will. They're like, okay, well, tithing is an Old Testament principle.
Yeah,
so it's just not something that we need to do anymore. Anything that I give, you should just be happy with, because it's all covered in this New Testament. And I think that he did a really great job of being able to tie it into the New Testament and say, no. It's not just that we forsake it. I mean, I look at so many principles in the Old Testament that we still use today. There's a reason why the Ten Commandments are still very valuable and valid in Scripture, even though it's in the Old Covenant. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things. I know I'm tying a bunch of different things to it, but I do think that was one of the strong suits in the way Pastor Robert Morris does speak on these things. He ties a lot of different things into it, and he's going to even more in these next few messages. Some of these personal stories, these revelations that he has,
testimonies,
I think are huge.
Huge, really, really good. And I think even one of the things that stood out to me personally, there's this aspect of when we give. it actually breaks that curse over us, and then it then rebukes the devourer. And so looking at in my own life, I'm thinking, there's some times that things have come against our family and things that have come against me personally. And then recognizing that, now, wait a second, like that, the devourer was after everything.
Yes.
And he was actually stopped at the door. Like, did it affect us in a way? Yes. But did it devour? Did it destroy? Did it completely tear everything down? No. Because of this thing in our lives where God's hand has been upon us, and really he's been sheltering us as that good shepherd, whacking the devourer in the teeth when he comes around prowling like a lion. So I've personally been able to I don't know, it brought some perspective, I think, of just like, there have been multiple times where things could have gone a completely different way very quickly, but seeing his hand move in that faithful way.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it really is. A lot of people really struggle with that. And I hope that I hope that these past few weeks, and I hope that even as we dive deeper into these next 2 or 3 weeks, that you would just be able to continue to be open. And if you are struggling in that area, start small. Start with just looking at these basic principles. You don't have to start with budgeting everything out. One of the things, I don't know if it's in the messages that are coming up, or if it's been in a past one, or if it was in one. There were a lot of messages that we looked. I think we looked through 7 of them, and then ended up choosing like 5. And so I don't know where it was at in that, but he even says, he's like, I'm not Dave Ramsey. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm not doing this so that you can have all of these budgets and these things ready to go and I can be a financial manager. But he's like, no, I'm just trying to tie the scriptures and the biblical principles into this.
Absolutely.
So start small and just apply those things that you are really feeling convicted about. For some of you, it might be the tithe. For some of you, it might be the offering and that generosity piece after it. I don't know where you're at, but I do think over these next few weeks, you're going to be able to hear a lot of really cool pieces. I'm really excited about this next message coming up. I think that it's going to be just amazing. And it's going to be just a really, really cool thing. And so, let us know how you're enjoying this series. If it's a little bit of a stretch, I think it is a stretch for everybody on some level to be able to do this. We're not a multi-site campus. This isn't a normal thing to have, all of that. I think you had an experience at Elevation where you were visiting and you saw it and it was like, oh wow, so we're kind of in that right now,
Yeah, we are for sure.
But I'm very excited about these next few weeks. And so let us know how you're enjoying that. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about these next 2 messages. And then we'll be closing out the series very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's coming fast.
It's going to be awesome. So like we said, please text us if you have any sort of questions or anything that you are wanting to have us discuss. We were actually talking earlier this week about something that you had brought up. We said we would be bringing our questions even to this platform here in these first couple of weeks. And so you had something that you were kind of wanting to break down. I wanted to give some time for that. So
I think one of these questions, especially in this day and age where our kids and everyone has access to an incredible amount of information. A lot of it good, a lot of it not so good. And so the role in a Christian life and the role of a parent specifically, but even as we've talked about discipleship, as we lead other people, like how aware do we keep ourselves and how do we maintain an understanding in the culture versus like just being saturated by the culture and then also not on the other side of the spectrum, not being so removed that we have zero clue what our kids are facing every day, what other people are facing, that we're so removed from everything that we have no clue what people are struggling with and what's going on. And so it specifically came up. So Josh had this podcast that he had turned me on to, and there's a pastor who has this podcast called The Basement.
The Basement with Tim Ross. He actually left his church. So he was a lead pastor and left his church to do this. He's doing the podcast full time now.
Nice. So I thought I had picked up on them. I'm like, no, it couldn't be. But okay, it is.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's wild.
And so not hearing this gentleman before and not sure, the very first podcast I listened to, he's talking about some things that he's been coming up with his kids, and his encouragement. And I'm not going to go into detail, but his encouragement was like, hey, if there's like, you need to Google these terms, you need to like research so you know. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, because I think for me personally, there is a side of this. It's like, to be aware is different than like drinking it in, and then like, how far do you go? How far is too far? And so on my side, really just trying to think critically and have an open mindset, but not just diving headlong and then I think so. If I can I go a little further?
Yeah, absolutely, of course.
I think on that, there's so much discernment and wisdom that's needed, especially as we're diving into what is happening in the world and in the culture. And I think one of my biggest reservations is just this thing of like, I mean, he actually used this analogy of like, what type of pornography are people looking at? And like, you should know what people are looking at so that you can be informed of what's really kind of grabbing people's mind. And I'm like trying to think through this, and I'm imagining some guy in his basement and his wife's like, what are you doing? Oh, just research, honey. I'm just researching. I gotta know what the kids know. Like there's this license that seems to come, and how quickly it could tip into those kinds of areas. And so looking at really, what is that balance? And I kind of figured that Josh and I might see a little bit differently on this, so I thought that's why it'd be good to bring it up here.
It is, and honestly, I say this with all the reservation in the world, because I'm not a parent, and I'm not someone who claims to know everything. Like, I'm 26 years old. Like, I get that there's a lot of people with a lot more wisdom than me, especially as it comes to, I'm glad you brought up the porn searches and that thing, because he did add that caveat of like, it's not that you go look at it, but it's that you have the information to know what people are dealing with. I do see it just a little bit differently. I do understand all of the reservations you have and all of the different things that you see, and I do urge people to walk with these things with caution, because it is a very slippery slope. I think the biggest thing is it requires maturity. It requires spiritual maturity. It requires emotional maturity. It requires you to be spiritually sharp. You know what I mean? You cannot just willy-nilly walk into that. I liken it to somebody who might be struggling with alcoholism, and then you get invited to go to a sports bar. Well, that's great. That's fine. But you know that you're going to be around a lot of alcohol, even though it's not, all that it's there. You're there for the food, or you're there for the friends, or you're there for the game, or whatever. But you have to be cautious extra because of the things that you might be susceptible to. And so I do see that, but I also see a huge need to be able to understand where people are coming from. As it relates to that search item, yes, I think that it is important that we know what people are dealing with, because it speaks to the greater heart issue. If you're looking at, and he actually went into this, when you look at some of those top searches, they are a lot of things that biblically God speaks against. And so it speaks to the heart that it speaks to the heart of those people that are struggling with that it's more of an issue than even just pornography, or more of an issue than just alcoholism, or more of an, like, when you're able to actually do the research to do that. Now, again, it takes that maturity, because it's very easy to do a search and go, maybe I should just check it out and see. And then all of a sudden, you're either relapsing if you struggled with that before, you're doing things that can really be problematic and be an issue. But I do think that there is some value, because you start to begin to not speak the language yourself, but know when people are coming to you. How many times as a pastor have you experienced, walking to meet somebody new? They talk to you a certain way, and then they're like, what do you do? And you're like, well, I work at a church, or I'm a pastor. And immediately they tense up. They're like, I'm sorry. How many times as people, they're cussing up a storm, or they're talking about this, or they're talking about that, and you go, yeah, I'm a pastor. And they go, sorry, I really, and it's like, no. I don't want you to change your language. I don't want you to change where you're at. I'm not here to like judge you for cussing or for doing that. But it does allow for you, as they begin to speak, for you to be able to understand where they're coming from. You know what I mean? And there's an increasingly growing language and growing culture around especially young people that as a 26-year-old I'm trying to keep up. Mm-hmm. I was talking to a Youth Alive group just last week. There's a social media app called Be Real, and I've been on it for a couple of months. And I'm talking to them because it was huge for among youth, students and different things. And I was like, yeah, I'm on Be Real. And they were like, oh, what are you guys talking about? And they're like, oh, yeah, we're past that. Be Real's like over. And I'm like, what? Okay. Like
I just got it Tuesday.
I'm 26 years old, right? And so it's like, it's a very slippery slope. But I think with spiritual and emotional maturity, it's something that can be of value, especially as you interact with people.
So here's how I see it differently.
Yes.
So I think that and honestly, one of the things that Tim Robbins, that guy. So one of the things that Tim Ross was talking about that I think is key is this thing of conversation. Yes. So the whole thing came up because he's with his kids. Yes. They're talking about things around the dinner table.
Yes.
Items are coming up, and he's like, what is that?
Yes.
And then there's this information transfer that happens. And I think it's the same person to person. As someone comes to me and says, hey, man, I'm really struggling with this, and this. Then through that relationship and that conversation, I don't particularly need to have all this information beforehand, especially like you said, God's word warns us, hey, man, this is the human heart condition. Yes. Nothing is new under the sun. Like there's some new ways that people are tackling this, and the exposure is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I think it's, in another aspect of that, like I can't believe how much information comes back toward us. Like just this week, Marissa and I were talking about this car repair. Didn't search it, whatever, and all of a sudden it's like, would you like to have blah blah blah? You can go. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude. So then like I'm typing in Google things that now are they going to pop up on my sidebar? How many things are going to come up as advertisements? Even with blockers in place, man, stuff slips through.
Yep.
And so I think that's where I err more on the side of caution. And I even heard this thing this week. It was about a different topic they were talking about, but I thought it was applicable just in this thing of Deuteronomy and places where, man, God warns against even bringing idols into your home from foreign places.
Yeah.
And there's this propensity for us to fall very easily. Like we know that we're enticed by our own hearts, and we have these things. And so I think that's where I would say even to exercise even more caution.
Yes.
That there's our bent as human beings is already toward things that are not of God. And so the more that we can safeguard ourselves, and like I said with conversation, the more that we have interaction, like if we segment ourselves and silo ourselves as Christians to just be around other Christians who are like us, then that's detrimental because we won't hear those things.
Yes, and that's the overcorrection that I think a lot of us are falling into, especially here recently, and especially in the place that we live. There's a lot of this thing of the find and replace tool in Microsoft Word, where you can find a word and replace it with something else. I feel like Christians are doing a lot of that in just culture in general. We find a thing that we might want to see or want to do, and then we just replace it with something that's Christian. But what it's ending up doing is it's actually losing influence, and it's losing the ability to relate with people. And so I think what it does is it actually creates more of a shelter in place for these Christians who don't want to engage with these things because it's too weird or it's too awkward or it's too whatever. And he brings up the point, like if you talk the language of a student or a teenager or somebody who is a little bit younger or a little bit older even, if you talk their language, watch and see how they respond. If you as a parent can be able to learn the language and learn some of the euphemisms and learn some of the things that are happening in schools or happening with your teenagers, watch as they begin to go, wait a minute, you know what that is? You understand, like, wait a minute, because then it creates a level of accountability. I think that's where it can also be really helpful as you know that, because it creates accountability. My parents knew everything that I was doing when it came to especially on being online and all that. Like there was a rule in our house that we could not have any electronics upstairs. It was all in one spot because they wanted to know everything that was happening. And it wasn't that they didn't trust me. I mean, there was that because I was a teenager. Let's be real. Mm-hmm. But it was more of like, hey, we just want you to know that we know. You know what I mean? And I think as you can begin to learn the language, as you can begin to learn euphemisms, as you can begin to learn where especially youth culture is at, it brings a level of accountability. Because sometimes I've seen it happen where students talk in code. That actually, that youth language and that youth culture that they are so involved in actually becomes a code, because if you don't know it, they're going to be speaking a different language that you don't know. Yeah. And so they'll be talking about something and you go, oh yeah, that word. All right, cool. Yeah, that's great. And they're like, you don't even know what that means. You're like, no, I don't. And then you walk yourself into a trap and now they're, laughing or whatever. And so it brings a level of accountability to them, because they're like, wait a minute, if you know what that is, then that means I can't say it anymore because I know what that means. And I know that it's bad. Right. You know what I mean? And so I think that there is a level. I think there is a happy medium between where we're at.
Yeah.
Because, and ultimately that's, I think, where we're both trying to go.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get too far into it so that you don't even look like a Christian. But then you don't want to get too far removed away from it so that you're not engaging in the culture and not engaging in the world that you live in, right? Like, we are in the world, not of it. And I feel like a lot of people don't want to be in the world either. You know what I mean? No. And that is an issue, especially when we're called to be able to go out. And then I think the expectations thing is a big thing. And that's kind of where I'll end on, is we have an expectation that everybody that we interact with and everybody that we talk to should think like us, be where we're at. And if they're not, then we look down on them. And I think as you begin to learn some of these cultural things, some of the cultural norms, some of the language, some of the things that especially students are dealing with, facing, joking about, you're actually able to meet them where they're at and not look down on them so much. I think that's a huge deal, especially where we live. We have a lot of older people. We just do. And so anytime that you have any sort of youth movement, especially around here, it's going to be met with skepticism. You know what I mean? And so I think like that can also be a way to kind of guard against that as well. So I know we're probably not on the same page with it, but I do think we're both heading into that middle space where we can find that happy medium, because it's important to have.
Yeah, absolutely, it is, and like this, man. Yes. Open dialogue is super important.
It's huge.
Hanging out with your kids, and I still maintain that, man. The dinner table is crucial.
Yes.
To all kinds of things, whether it's outreach. Or simply with your family. Yep. There's a lot that can happen around a meal. So,
yep, absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And please like and subscribe and put your comments down there. We'd love to hear how God is working in your heart as it pertains to giving, but also just some of those questions that you may have about walking out the Christian faith. Not even just about the Christian faith, but man, how do I walk this thing out every single day? Yep. So we'd love to tackle those with you. And what else am I missing, Josh?
So you can follow us on all of our social media. Make sure to subscribe, like what Jeremy was saying. But you can also follow the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you want to listen to it, we have that option. If you want to watch it, you can watch it as well. So thank you so much for doing that. Make sure to text us your questions so that we don't have to have ourselves talk about all the things that we see. I mean, we can do that all day.
Oh yeah, we got plenty of problems.
But yeah, man, we would love to be able to hear from you. And so we'll see you in a couple of weeks, breaking down these next couple of messages. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your weekend.
All right.